Good morning, Forward Point. How's everybody doing today? Yeah, it's so great to see all of you. My name's Jimmy. I'm one of the pastors here at Forward Point, and it's just always an honor and a pleasure to be together. If you're joining us online, welcome. The things that are happening here, we make sure that you are able to join us in person as comfortable as your bed may be or your couch at home may be. We would love to have you here in person. It's something special here to be together. I do want to say thank you to everyone who came out to the movie night and helped our team. You guys were the team who came out and helped clean up, and you saw a picture from outside. This was a picture inside, going on in the foyer of people coming in. There's a big line of people waiting for popcorn. Guys, they're paying top dollar for the popcorn that you guys get for free here on a Sunday morning. I'm just saying, they get to come in and they're paying like $6 for a large box, and you guys got all-you-can-eat buffet popcorn back here going on. And then there was another line going on to help meet the characters, Mario and Princess Peach, and they had lots of fun. I was at Love Handles across the way there, and I could not be a part of it, but this was my view from Love Handles. I was like, I started, this is around 4:45. People were lining up there to get ready for the show. And I kind of felt like, the song, that puppy in the window, right? The puppy, like looking at all the people on the other side of the window with like longing and who's going to come and pet me, right? Somebody come and take me home. Because it was hard because this line was forming at the theater, and literally it was dead at Love Handles, and I'm thinking, man, I could be doing something over there, or I could be helping out, or I want to be where all the action is, or all the people are, or I don't know if you've ever grown up as a kid, you had that day where you were sick, or maybe a few years ago in quarantine, right, and all your friends are outside playing, and you're stuck inside, and you're looking out at the window, right? And it's almost like, you're pressed up against the window just trying to, somebody come and help me get to where you are and where all the fun is. And I missed it, but we got to do what we do at Love Handles. But you guys did an awesome job here for the movie night, and just nothing but positive comments and the ability to be able to bless our community by offering events like that. We could just show a movie, but we're always thinking, what can we do to add value to our events? So we work and think hard. We're going to, get costumes that, are an investment, but we're going to use to provide these different kinds of experiences for our community. So it is lots of fun. But when you're in those moments, right? When you're in those moments when you're on the other side of the window kind of glaring out, wishing you were there, or you're at Love Handles, being all creeper on what's going on over here at the theater, taking, telescopic photos from across the blocks there. What do you do in those moments when you're just kind of waiting, right? When you're kind of longing that you were someplace that you aren't currently. When you're hoping, wishing that you see all the action, maybe you see some friends who are in a relationship or married finally, and it's like, this friend gets married, and then this friend gets married, and now this friend is getting married. You don't even like this person, but they're getting married now, and it's like everyone around you is getting married, and you wish you were there in that spot, right? Or maybe it's in your work environment. All your friends are getting jobs and they're moving up the ladder, or they're just super fulfilled and they have all these stories, and you're just kind of working at McDonald's or, this different place that you never, you used to make fun of people who work there, and now you find yourself there and you have this longing of, man, I just wish I could be where they're at. Well, we've been going through the book of Esther, and if you're not familiar with Esther, Esther is really this young orphan girl who kind of goes from rags to riches. She has this story where she's just fine and content kind of being on her own, suffering tragedy at the loss of her parents, but then her cousin Mordecai adopts her and begins to take care of her. And then there's this opportunity. There's a vacancy that happens within the kingdom. The king is banished, his wife. There's no more queen. So we're going to have the first ever Miss Universe contest. And Esther winds up going through and goes through the beautification process, and she becomes queen of all of Persia. Wow, what an amazing opportunity. What an amazing experience. And if it just stopped there, right, it would be kind of the princess story, the Disney story, the happily ever after story. But it doesn't end there. That's really just the first couple chapters. Then enter the protagonist, and enter Haman is his name, and he begins to go through this process where he's got some bad blood with Esther's cousin Mordecai, and he decides, you know what, I'm not just going to take it out on you, Mordecai, I'm going to take it out on all the Jews, and I'm going to tell the king that you guys are nothing but trouble, and we're going to kill all of you. We're going to put into place this plan where everyone can just go after Jews on the specific day, and to incentivize them, we're going to tell people that whatever kind of loot that you get in the process, it is yours to take. So feel free to go after whoever. Feel free to rack up as many kills as possible, because you're just going to make yourself richer. And we find ourselves in the midst of this hunt for the Jewish people. And then last week we looked at this, how Mordecai begins to reach out to his cousin Esther and say, Esther, here's what's going on. We are kind of at the end of the rope here. If you don't do something, then we don't have a chance. And maybe, Esther, it's possible. I mean, I've been doing the numbers, the probability that you could be here, this day of the week, this month, and having all these things come together for this opportunity to have influence into the king. Maybe you're here for such a time as this. And Esther says, you know what, no, it's not about maybe. It is that I'm here, and if it winds up being that I die by doing this, because not anybody can just go to the king, you have to be summoned. But if it happens for the sake of doing what I feel like God has called me to do, if I die, then I die. But here's what I want you to do. Mordecai, you gather all the people. You guys fast and pray for 3 days. We're going to do that here. And then at the end, we're going to go to the king. So that's where we pick up things today. If you're following along, I encourage you can open up your Bibles to Esther chapter 5, or you can follow up on the screen. And this is how it starts. Esther chapter 5, verse 1, it says, 3 days later. And this is really important, because each time we've looked at kind of the turning of a page for the chapters, we recognize that there's been some time happening that has been different. One chapter was 3 years. One chapter there was a distance of 5 years. Like, there's all sorts of different time things. And here we have 3 days later. Esther says, you guys pray and fast for 3 days. We're going to pray and fast for 3 days. So here we are 3 days later. We kind of get to skip through the pain and suffering that comes along with fasting for 3 days. The process of going without something for 3 days. I don't know what it is for you, but for me, man, if I think about going without my phone for 3 days, I start to shiver at the thought, right? I mean, I'm kind of so connected to my phone that a lot of times I feel like my butt is buzzing, and I pull out my phone, and there's nothing new on there, right? It's almost like it's wishful butt buzzing, I think. That I'm hoping for kind of the next, message, the next news flash, the next alert that I would get, and I pull it out. I don't know how many times throughout the course of the day I pull that thing out and nothing new has transpired, right? I mean, that's the place that we've gotten to as a culture, where our phones, it would be like fasting. But for them, and for all humans, the idea of going without food and water for 3 days, man, that's hard to do. That's drastic. And here we have kind of a SpongeBob 3 days later, right, moment where we kind of get to skip over all of that process. Right, because if you remember where we left off last week in the end of chapter 4, we remember that Esther had sent back this answer to Mordecai, go and get all the Jews living in Susa together. And what you're going to do is you're going to fast for me, and you're not going to eat or drink for 3 days. And neither day or night, and I and my maids and will fast with you, and if you will do this, then I will go to the king, even though it's forbidden. And here's kind of the pinnacle moment from last week. If I die, I die. And Mordecai left and carried out Esther's instructions, right? So here we are, the turning of the page to chapter 5, and we have this 3 days later moment. And in reality, it might as well have been an eternity later when you think about kind of being a dead man walking, right? Kind of having in your mindset that the days that you have left here on earth are numbered. I mean, we all know intrinsically that we are dying, right? From the moment you're born, while your body is growing and creating new things, you're also at the same time dying. That is the answer for all of us. At some point, I can tell you what's in your future. You're going to be 6 feet under, right? I know. How about a little motivational speak for a Sunday morning to inspire you to live out your faith for the rest of the day, right? Yeah, good news, right? But that is where all of us are going to be. There is no, getting around that. I remember when I was in Indiana, and there was a man who was coming to our church, and he got diagnosed with this terminal cancer. But it was a terminal cancer where it was like, in maybe 16, 18 months. And there was this period of time where he was able to do things like anybody else would. And I remember a group of us going to his house and kind of helping him get his house in order so he would be able to sell it. I remember that summer going with him, and he went on a mission trip with us to Central America. And there's something very humbling about walking with somebody who recognizes that their days are numbered. There's a purpose. There's an intentionality that you kind of live with, recognizing that, man, I can probably count on a calculator the days, the breaths that I have left here in life. And we kind of don't ever get to that point until it's too late. And we look back with regret and wish, man, if only I had done this, or if I'd only known, then maybe I would have done something different. And here we have Esther kind of in that moment recognizing there's only a few amounts of sunsets that she has left. And this fasting is kind of developing in her a sense of longing, this sense of intense desire for something. And what do you do in those moments? What do you do in those moments when all you have left is being desperate for God? When all you have left is, God, man, desperation for him to do something. That's rock bottom, right? And we talked about last week how rock bottom looks different for each person, but it feels the same. We all know what it feels like. But today, longing, this idea of longing, it looks different for each person, but it feels the same. For me, it looks like gazing wistfully out the Love Handles window at my friends, being able to put on this awesome event where all the people are, and it's like crickets over there, right? Like that looks different than the longing that you're going through, what you're wishing for, what you're hoping for. But it feels the same for all of us. We understand it's a tie that kind of binds us. It's maybe, like we already said, the desire for a spouse or just even the desire for a relationship. And we get to a place where you said, man, I just will settle for another human being who's alive. Out of this sense of just longing and desiring something so bad. It could be an affliction that you've been going through. You got a health diagnosis, and then you beat the health diagnosis, only for a short while later for you get another health diagnosis that seems worse or the same than the one you just got through. Or maybe it's your kids. Man, your kids keep kind of causing all sorts of gray hairs to come about in your head. And you think, man, God, either you need to take them or I'm going to take them because of what they're doing to me. You just wish with nothing else that they just would wholeheartedly give their life to following Jesus. And you have this longing that they would live with the same values and the same principles that you have and how you put Jesus first. It's amazing. There's some moments that I can think about in my life where everything else just kind of went dark and all I cared about and focused was my kids. Most recently, we had an art show at Love Handles where Litly, my pre-K4 class, had an art show of all their artwork on the Love Handles walls, right? It's been super fun. But, Litly's there playing with her friends, and she gets a whole eye full of another girl's head in her eye, right? So for the past week, if you've seen Litly, she looks like she was just, coming out of some kind of boxing Hall of Fame match or something because she's got this real big shiner. But when that happens, she's in the other room. I hear her scream and crying, right? And as a parent, you know this. You can pick out your kid's cry out of a stadium of noises. You can hear your kid crying. And all I could think about is, man, I would give anything to take this pain away for my kid. I think of Justice Joy, my oldest, when she was young. She was sitting up in one of our high chairs, and she fell down, and she broke her arm. And it was really broke her arm to the point where it was like go in the other direction, right? One of those moments when you're like, ugh, when you see it on TV, right? Well, this was in person, and all of a sudden you go into dad mode. Everything else goes away, and I just have this longing to take away this pain as I'm holding her in my arms, and Chazlet's driving the car, and we're trying to get to the hospital. I just would give anything to take away this pain from my little girl, this longing, this desire to take it away. And 3 days later, Esther has got this same longing, the same desire, like this weight of the world that rests on her shoulders. So she gets dressed in her royal robes, and she took up a position in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's throne room. And the king was on his throne facing the entrance. I remember from last week, right? At this point, she has already committed a punishable offense where you should be killed. The only way you get out of this is if for some reason he's feeling gracious and decides to pardon you. But as soon as this culminates, you can almost hear the guards kind of coming together to be able to take away the queen and administer the punishment. And what happens? This is where the dun 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 dun, right? When he noticed Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased to see her. And this kind of should throw you off guard because Esther, last week, she was saying, you know what, Mordecai, man, the king hasn't even requested me to be in his presence for going on 30 days now, right? I don't know if he just doesn't like the way I look anymore. I don't know if he's just not that interested in me anymore. I don't know if I've lost some kind of mojo or whatever, but he has not had any kind of desire for me for these last 30 days. And that was one of the things she scares about. And she gets there, and we get an insight into the king's heart where the king was pleased to see her. And this is a theme all throughout Esther and Esther's relationship with people who were nothing like her. Esther was a Jew living in occupied country, surrounded by a Persian kingdom and an army and structure, processes, systems that were so unfamiliar to her. But everywhere she went, everyone loved her. All the Persians, all of her maids, all of her servants, all of her competitors, everybody just loved Esther. And here we have, even though he hasn't seen her for 30 days, maybe the sexual attraction that he once had for her has gone away, or maybe the infatuation, right? Because you remember back in the early Esther, the king, the book of Esther tells us, was attracted to Esther more than any of the other women, right? And she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. Like there's some serious infatuation going on here at the beginning of their relationship. But it gets back to this place where the king is just pleased to see her. There's something about the way that Esther lives. There's something about the way that Esther carries herself, that the way that she interacts with everybody, that he doesn't have to worry about what she's doing. Right? And infatuation is this idea that we're probably all familiar with, whether or not you'd like to admit it or not, where we're into something because we like the way that we feel as a result. Sure, we'd love to kind of mask it and say, man, I would do anything for this person. I love this person. But the reality is we're just in love with how it makes us feel. But through the course of time, Esther builds this relationship where even though the infatuation has worn off, the king has this great respect for Esther, and he's pleased to see her. Man, I relate, right? Because growing up, I was somebody who was easily infatuated. I could bounce from like girl to girl. As soon as it kind of got boring, then, I found the next one that just was like, oh, I'm so in love with you now, right? Because in reality, I was just in love with feeling like I was in love. And sometimes I still catch myself in other areas, sometimes in jobs, right? I think about, working in IT for a long time, and then I see other jobs of people looking for IT people, and I see like the salary, and I'm like, it would just be fun to go work for someplace new. Because like the honeymoon stage of most new jobs, it's super fun. We all know what it's like to kind of feel like you're learning something new, and it's new and exciting, and then what happens? You stop feeling like you're in love with being in love. And you're like, it's time to change, right? Some of you have had more jobs in the last few weeks than some of us have in a lifetime, all right? Because you're kind of an addict to that adrenaline feeling, that infatuation feeling. But beyond that, the king was pleased to see her. Right? Pleased to see her. And here's the thing about longing. When you put yourself back in that moment of whatever it is you're longing for, I don't know what it is for you. I know what it is for me. But I guarantee there's probably something that you're longing for, maybe multiple things that you're longing for, that you have a sense of intense desire. And here's the thing about longing for God, because all of us would say, oh, yes, we long for God. Longing is easy to mask, Forward Point, but it's impossible to hide. Right? This is one of those things where we can say one thing, but when you begin to look at the actions, when you begin to look at the fruit of your life, and you add up all of those things, it might prove a different case than what you express as what you're longing for. I came across this quote on the interwebs, right? It says, I was always ashamed to take, so I gave. It was not a virtue. It was a disguise. And a lot of us, what we do is we disguise, we mask our longing because maybe we're ashamed, maybe because of something that we've been through, some tragedy, some kind of experience, but we mask what we go through. But here we see that Esther, and the way that she lived, put her in a place that the most powerful person in the world looked at her and was pleased. This is easy for us to recognize in other people, right? There's probably people that you know in your life who you're like, man, I could be okay if I never saw that person again, right? Shame on you. But it's true, right? Of course, you're not the problem. Right? It wouldn't be you that is the issue, that anybody feels that way about you. But that other person, let me tell you, right? All the while having this claimed longing for maybe more of God, go deeper in your relationship. And it's really a disguise. But Esther had this way, in the way that she lived, where she added value to all the people around her. And as a result, it gave her a great place of influence. Man, I was wishing that I could be here on Thursday for movie night, and I'm pulling up Facebook, and I'm going through all the social media posts, and even more so, people are posting pictures and having so much fun, and it's this large crowd. And I come across this one post, and this is from a woman who has a business here in Eastwood, and she posted it first on her own timeline, and then she shared it to the Eastwood Community Conversation, which if you're not in Eastwood, you may not be familiar with, but it's the local, where everyone complains about everything, forum, right? And this is what she says. She says, thank you so much, Forward Point, for always giving our community something fun to do and always bringing us all so much joy. We are so lucky to have you as our Eastwood neighbors. We love you all so much, right? Hugs and kisses. Thanks. Hugs and kisses, X's and O's. I don't know how you give a church hugs and kisses, but yes, hugs and kisses nonetheless. And then she made it a point to share it on the Eastwood page and tag us again. You may not be familiar with this, but I'll share a little bit of her story. If you were a part of Forward Point during Christmas Eve, on Christmas Eve, afterwards, we had a mission of giving away free, I think it was around 500 dozens. Is that how you say that? 500 dozen? I don't know. A dozen 500 times? We'll say it that way. I don't know. Boxes of Krispy Kreme donuts, right? All you had to do was go out to the foyer, you pick up a box. Some of you picked up multiple boxes, and we said, go out into the community and just give these to people who are working and say, we are so thankful that you are working here on Christmas Eve. We know it's not where you probably want to be, but you're doing something valuable for our community, and we just want to say thank you. And she was one of the businesses that somebody gave a box of Krispy Kreme donuts to. She owns a basket company right down here in Shop City, and she posted it and shared it online, right? About how meaningful it was for her. She had never had a box of Krispy Kreme donuts before, and working on Christmas Eve, and just all these things. And what we're doing is we're building some bridges. We have a whole lot better opportunity of having influence into her life today as a result of some of the sacrificial giving, the sacrificial sweating that some of you did to be in those costumes, i.e. my daughter and her friend. Right? But because of you deciding that I'm going to put my desires on the back burner and choose to just serve and to sacrifice, I'm going to help Forward Point be able to gain as much influence as possible in the community. And this is an ongoing story. Man, this is 2 posts that she's just loved on Forward Point publicly to everyone in Eastwood. We're adding her to the prayer list. I'm believing at some point Nikki's going to be up here sharing her Forward Point story. As a result of the influence, as a result of saying, how do we add value? How do we get to that place where if we had to close our doors, Nikki would be the first person gathering up all the people and saying, we got to go protest whatever it is that's causing them to have to shut down because of how much difference we've made in our life. Man, Forward Point, you guys, you should be so proud of the work that you're doing. So the king recognizes, okay, this is probably not a cordial of, just visiting just because. So he asks, what's your desire, Queen Esther? What do you want? Ask and it's yours, even if it's half my kingdom. And man, that's a pretty awesome description of the influence that Esther has into King Xerxes' heart. I'll give you anything you want. You just name it, and I'll give it to you. Now, if you or me went in there and we know that our days are numbered, that there's this madman and he's got a plan to wipe us out, I'm going in there, and after I hear I got this kind of influence with the king, I'm just going in guns a-blazing, saying this guy's got to go. You know what, Xerxes? I will take you up on your offer. I will take this half of the kingdom, okay? All of my people now can move to that half of the kingdom. We're going to build a wall in between, and Haman and all of his people can stay on that side, right? I'm just going in doing whatever I think. Speaking, going off the top of my head, probably getting myself into trouble. But remember, Esther just came out of 3 days of longing and searching out the heart of God. And I don't know that Esther really got any specific answers. From reading the book of story, I don't know that God kind of revealed to her in a dream or, put some clouds together and gave her a plan or a course of action. I don't get that feeling from the story. I feel like Esther just kind of went in here and said, God, this is what I have to offer you. You do whatever you want with the situation because it's going to require you to move. So here's how she responds. She says, if it please the king, let the king come with Haman to a dinner that I've prepared for him. This is super important on a lot of different levels. You see, Esther is longing. Esther has this deep desire to save her people. And as a reminder, fasting for them was going without food or drink for 3 days, right? In the midst of going without food or drink for 3 days, if you've been without food or drink for 3 days, the last thing that you want to be doing on day 3 is making supper. The last thing that you want to do is be hanging with your friends and they're like, who wants McDonald's, right? And they go through the drive-thru and you smell all the fried, greased beef, heart attack stuff in the air. Right? That's the last thing that you want to be doing. But what Esther has been doing is she's been preparing a meal. She says, you know what? I know the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Right? We start the book of Esther where what is King Xerxes doing? King Xerxes is throwing this 180-day party that's just day after day of eating and feasting. And then once that is over, then he throws another week-long party for everyone who helped him throw the 180-day long party. And in the midst of this vulnerable state, in this midst of probably not having any energy, of feeling weak as the result of no water or food, before even going to the king, she begins to prepare a banquet. And here's what I love about this description is because it gives us an idea into longing. And in the midst of longing, I believe that we're called to pray as if everything depends on God and to act as if everything depends on us. Right? We pray And we say, God, we can't do this without you. God, we need you. God, here are the pieces. Here's everything that we've got going on. This is yours to use. But then we act as if everything depends on us. And God, I'm just going to work. I'm going to make a meal. I'm going to do whatever it takes to try. We talked about in the first week the man who was praying, man, I just want God to move and save me from the storm, right? And the emergency team came, and then the boat came, and the helicopter came, and he's like, no, God's going to save me, right? And he's like, God, why didn't you save me? And he's like, I sent the boat, I sent the team, I sent the helicopter, right? Like, we're called to pray and pray as if everything depends upon God, but then we're called to act and to live as if everything depends on us, that we just, in the midst of the longing, in the midst of the waiting, we're not just on the bar taking pictures across the street. Right? What we do with that longing is not just allow days and weeks and months to pass by saying, man, just waiting, God, for you to give me this. We roll up our sleeves. We get our hands dirty. We just start serving. We just start jumping in. Maybe it's making popcorn. And then we're like, man, I've burnt myself for the last 4 weeks making popcorn. Making popcorn's not for me. But now let me try this. Right? Not pointing any fingers. Not looking at any side of the theater. Right? But I'm just going to get my hands, I'm going to jump in cannonball style. I'm not going to like tiptoe in and, ooh, it's chilly. We just start doing something and say, God, until you direct me to do something specific, I'm just going to start doing whatever I can in the moment. Because I'll be honest with you, when I think about what we've gotten to when I say prayer, and even Lois talking about a prayer vigil, like for a big part of my life, I would start to kind of get hives, get nervous at that thought. Because it's hard. It's hard to sit down and just pray for minutes, much less hours or days. There's time. I went to Bible school, and my school had these different things. They had a weekend of prayer, and they had then a week of prayer, and then they had once a week every day we had chapel, but one day a week we would take that time and we would break down into these prayer groups. And man, I got myself into so much trouble, not because I was misbehaving, but because I just fell asleep. Right? And if you know anything about me, and probably nobody in here should, but my wife, I snore really bad when I'm sleeping, okay? So, man, there was no translation when I was snoring during these prayer meetings, okay? This is not a pretty thing. There's one time in this little smaller prayer group, we broke down as like student council, and I was one of, class president, and we were in this group and praying, and I fall asleep in the midst of this prayer, and the person next to me nudges me, right? And when you fall asleep, you don't realize you fall asleep. You just realize you missed something. So I thought he was nudging me because I got asked to close in prayer. So I just started busting out in a closing prayer in the midst. I don't want to miss a beat or anything, right? And then I finished my prayer, and everyone just starts laughing at me because they're like, dude, you were snoring. It sounded like something was dying in the midst, right? Like, it's kind of scary. It can be a little intimidating. But the reality is that is just a part of. We pray. We have these moments. It's important for us to communicate with God and learn how to do that individually, but as groups. But it's also important to come out of those moments, roll up our sleeves, and just start. If you don't have any direction, that's not a sign that you get to just check out and not do anything. It's a sign that you just do whatever you think. And Esther said, you know what? I think a banquet would go a long way. Maybe I have a skill in cooking. Maybe that was part of what she did for her Miss America contest, right? Her skill was baking or cooking. I don't know. But she just decides, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to make it happen. And what if, forward point, what if you are the answer to your own prayer? You got a prayer right now, and you're waiting for the helicopter, you're waiting for the boat, you're waiting for someone else to come swoop in, and the reality is it is all hinging on you. You are the answer to your own prayer. you have a heart's desire for the unreached people group in Zambia, then you know what? You sell all of your stuff and move to Zambia. Do something. Pray as if everything depends on you, but then act and live as if everything. Pray as if everything depends on God, and then act and live as if everything depends on you. Right? So the king gets this request from Esther, and he says, all right, get Haman at once. Let's go to this dinner with Esther. And so the king and Haman joined Esther at the dinner that she had arranged. And as they were drinking the wine, the king said, okay, I know there's something going on here. You want something, right? So what is it that you want, Esther? Again, half my kingdom isn't too much to ask. Just ask. Whatever you want. Man, she's got the king kind of whining and dining. If she had his ear before, she definitely has the ear now. So what does she do? Does she come out guns blazing, ready to blast Haman? What does she do? She says, here's what I want. Dun, 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 dun. Esther answered, here's what I want. If the king favors me and is pleased to do what I desire and ask, then go kill and take out Haman because he's a low, rotten scoundrel. No. She says, let the king and Haman come again tomorrow to the dinner that I will fix for them. Then I will give a straight answer to the king's question. Right? Esther fasts for 3 days, and then she says, let's do a banquet. And then she says, you know what, let's do another banquet. Again, there's no divine revelation from God that after 2 banquets, then you can reveal your plea to the king. But Esther is just doing whatever she can. She's looking at the tools and the resources that she has around her. And she's probably nervous and she's scared. And she's like, you know what? We're going to try again tomorrow. Let's have another banquet tomorrow. And not to jump ahead of ourselves, but there's some supernatural things that are going on behind the scenes that we'll get into next week. But God says, you know what? In the midst of that heart, where she's just longing and she's praying, she's been fasting, God, here are the pieces, you put them together, and he says, you know what? I can work with this. We can make this worse. We can make this work. But we're not going to get too far ahead of ourselves. How do you think this made Haman feel, right? Haman left the palace that day happy and beaming. This guy thinks he's the luckiest person in the world. He's gone through the ranks and been promoted and gotten to the number 2 spot in all of the kingdom. And now here he feels like the queen loves him just as much as the king. And of all the people that she could invite to these 2 banquets, she has invited me, has chosen me. And here's what it boils down to, forward point. It's not if you are longing for something, but what you are longing for. Because we see Esther has been longing for her people. But now we're going to get a glimpse into Haman's heart and what Haman's been longing for. And as I read it, man, I unfortunately found my heart all too often aligning with Haman more so than with Esther. Haman left the palace that day happy, beaming, and then he saw Mordecai sitting at the king's gate, ignoring him, right? Oblivious to him. Haman was furious with Mordecai, right? This is Haman's perspective. We recognize there's some bad blood between these guys. But last week, Mordecai was broken, right? What do you do when you hit rock bottom? You allow yourself to be broken. And Mordecai, instead of being in the sackcloth and the ashes and unable to go to work because you weren't allowed, he gets through and he says, you know what? I'm going to go back and live life as if nothing is going on. And that's where he finds Mordecai, back at the king's gate, back at his job, doing what he's supposed to do, and he's working. And Haman would love for nothing else than to be walking by and Mordecai to be afraid, Mordecai to get angry, Mordecai to get distracted because here's the man solely responsible. Right? We got this bad blood, and guess what, dude? I win. Check and mate. But that's not the effect that it has on Mordecai. Mordecai is working and doing his job, but it does have an impact on Haman because Haman was furious. Haman wants blood and shame and him to grovel at his feet, and he doesn't get any of that. Because when you long for anything else besides God, forward point, those who do will frustrate you. And Haman is longing for power and position. And Mordecai's longing has become desperation for God. And while he's come out of his own 3-day fast, he's just gone and said, you know what, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to do what I'm responsible for. This is my position, and I'm not going to let that falter. And this includes, all of the worldly things that we see kind of through Mordecai and Esther here, but this also includes spiritual gifts from God. Man, there's a lot of times that we use our gifts, we do things, but because we're not longing for God, instead we're longing for our own maybe position, our own influence. There's a lot of different ministries that come tumbling down as a result of kind of these mega pastor, celebrity star personalities. And underneath the surface, you can try to mask it, but in the end, the truth comes out. It's possible to be pursuing prayer, to be pursuing fasting, to pursuing Bible reading, to pursue, coming to life group or to our Sunday morning gatherings every week, right? To pursue all of these things and not be any closer or more like God in your life. That is totally possible. And then in the midst of that, you'll see someone who, doesn't seem to have a care in the world, and they're just almost free, almost like they float around because they don't have, the skills that you do. They don't have the position that you do. They don't have the resources that you do, but they are just content in their longing for, man, I just need God to show up in my life. And that will frustrate the bejeebies out of you. Because you think, man, I've put in the work. I went to Bible school. I did all these things. And that's going to mess with you. And they that have the nerve to think that they are okay just the way that they are. So what does Haman do with that frustration? It says he held himself in and went on home, and he got his friends together because misery loves company, right? And then with his wife Zeresh, and he started just bragging about how much money he had and about how many sons that he had and all the times that he's been promoted and honored and now he's in the highest position in the government, right? You can mask it, but you can't hide it. And he longs for position and power and influence. It's really a tale of two cities, right? I'll tell you, forward point, show me your friends, the people you hang around with, and I'll show you your future. And if you're just around people who are kind of telling you what you want to hear and not, saying, I'm not so sure about this, you should really, then be warned. Your heart's longing and desire may not be in line with where God wants you. And what does Esther do? She surrounds herself with Mordecai. I mean, he's not perfect, but he's broken. You can tell what's important to Haman based on the friends that he hangs around with and what he's talking about. I mean, what's important to them is, in that culture, how many sons did you have? You got a lot of sons, and wow, you're a big deal. You got lots of money? Wow, you are a big deal. And he goes on top of all that, Haman continued, he said, Queen Esther invited me to a private dinner she gave for the king, and just the three of us. And she's invited me to yet another one tomorrow, but I can't enjoy any of it when I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Right? None of it means anything based on how I feel, because forward point, when you long for anything else besides God, then you can have it all and still have nothing. Nothing. It feels like nothing. But he says, I can't enjoy any of it when I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. When I see this dude back to living on purpose, this guy who should be afraid, this guy who should be trembling, this guy who should be begging at my feet for mercy, instead choosing to live on purpose, to be a man of integrity and of honor, it'll burn you and drive you crazy. So his wife And all his friends, they said, you know what? What you need to do is build a gallows 75 feet high. And then first thing in the morning, speak with the king and get him to order Mordecai hanged on it. Then happily go with the king to dinner. Haman liked that. So he had the gallows built. Really, this idea of a gallows is really a 75-foot spike. And what they did, they didn't really hang people. What they did is just impaled them with a spike, and they would just let people sit on the side of the road. This is kind of the origin story of the Romans perfecting execution with the cross and what Jesus would endure. But bring it back, it was very barbaric, and they would just put people, impale them with a spear, and set you up on the side of the road as a form of shame and as a form of disgrace. And they said, you know what, Haman, why don't you make one 75 feet long and put Mordecai on it so that everybody knows what happens to people who cross those that the king has promoted, those with the money, those with the sons, those with all the things, right? That's what you're going to do. And we have these two pictures of two different people and what happens based on what they long for in their life. Esther longing for God to show up and to move. So she says, I don't know what or how, but would you just use what I have to offer? Because I make a mean banana bread. Or you have Haman who says, man, I long for position and power and influence. And I will do whatever it takes. Walk over whoever I have to walk over to get there. So forward point this morning, what is the object of your longing this morning? When you think about what it is that your heart desires for, that you feel like, man, you're on the inside looking out, wishing that you were there. Again, I know what it's like to have things other than God in that place. And I always come up empty-handed as a result. Most of my career, I've spent wondering how I could get to the bigger, better deal, right? The bigger church with the larger youth ministry, and then the more people, because it's going to obviously have a bigger paycheck, and it comes with my own office, and then maybe a bigger office, right? I've been there, and it didn't leave me anywhere fulfilled. And now I can say wholeheartedly, here I am with no office, a building that is, we all sing too loud, then the wall might fall down. But I have never been more content or happy or felt on purpose in my life. Because when the object of your longing is God, then the desires of your heart will begin to change. Right? We all have heard the verse, and probably we've quoted it in Psalm chapter 37, where it says, that God will give you the desires of your heart. That's kind of the, American, human nature version, because we leave out the first part. We love the idea of this genie up in the sky who will give us the desires of our heart. But the whole verse goes to delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. When you look at some different translations, some of the things that the way that they translate it, they say hope in the Lord, or do what the Lord wants, or be happy with the Lord, to seek your happiness in the Lord, and then he will give you the desires of your heart. I would translate it, long for the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. And then in that longing, what happens? What are you doing? Are you sitting on your couch, frustrated you're not getting it now, so you're going to just check out until you do? Are you just working your 9 to 5, putting in a paycheck, having no impact on your neighbors? You don't even know who your neighbor is. What are you doing with that longing? What is the object of that longing for you this morning? Is it the Lord? And I've come to this place in my life, 4 Point, where I've said, you know what? I long. Nothing means more important to me than one, for my family and my kids to love Jesus more today than they did yesterday. And then I want the same thing for my community. Like, that's what I'm willing to live for, to die for. That's what I want to do. I want to create these moments where I earn influence into my kids' lives, and I earn influence into my community's lives. Where when the time comes and people maybe like Kim has a softening in her heart or needs something, she knows the first place that she can reach out, and she's going to find a group of people who would stop at nothing to love on her. I call these wow moments. Man, and I long for wow moments. I believe wow moments is just saying that I'm going to do whatever I can now to create these moments for people that you would be able to use. At our M&M group meeting on Monday, I talked about at Love Handles. Man, at Love Handles, it wasn't even that intentional, but just happened as a result of the way we set ourselves up, where there was just wow moment after wow moment after wow moment. It's awesome to watch people come into Love Handles, and for the first time, they're kind of taken aback, because a lot of times they think, they thought it was a strip club, they thought it was a gym. Like, there's all sorts of things that people thought Love Handles was. So when they come in, there's this sense of relief, that they came in and it's frozen yogurt. Oh, that's so yummy. I can get behind that, right? So they see the machines there, then you walk in and we kind of go through the process. And then we say, oh, and the cups are just around the corner, right? If you've ever been in there, you've heard us say, the cups are just around the corner. So then they go and they start walking around the corner. And as soon as they go around the corner, they go, oh, there's more flavors. Because you can't see the machines that are on the side from the front. So they walk around the corner and they're like, oh, what a surprise. It's a wow moment. There's even more flavors. And I'm like, it started. The wow moments. Then they start walking and they get to the cups and they pick a cup, and then all of a sudden they're like, whoa, look at this room back here. Right? There's all these LED lights and there's all these arcade games, and this is so much fun. Wow. So cool. And then they get their frozen yogurt, and then they get to the toppings and they're like, wow, there's so many toppings. I have a hard time with options personally. I don't know how we got to the place that we did. Option overload. But just people are like, wow, there's so many toppings. This is awesome. This is amazing. Wow. And then when they get their frozen yogurt and they put it on the scale and it's like this tall, right? And then the price comes up and they're like, wow, yeah, you got to plan better next time, okay? Because that was poor planning on your part. And then we ask them if they want to, we match the tax and we give it to a local organization, and here's the list. You get to choose where that match goes towards. And then we say, would you like to round it up to the nearest dollar? And, probably 95, 98% of the people do. And it's my favorite part, because then I get to say, because you rounded up, I push a little button, we like to throw you a dance party. And the music gets really loud and the lights start flashing, right? And I start doing a little jig like this, And inevitably, not because of my dancing skills, I think it's because of the lights, they're like, wow, this is so much fun. And most of the time they say, I love this place, right? And then they start eating their frozen yogurt. And then they're like, the spoons change colors. This is amazing. Wow. And that's what we're here for, 4 Point. We're here to create wow moments. We're here to do whatever we can to create wow moments, because I believe wow moments are going to be little sparks, kind of like starting a fire. And one of these wow moments is going to give us an opportunity, is going to lead us into deeper relationship. Maybe for you, you've been coming here for a long time, but there was some kind of wow moment that allowed you to cross the line and step further into loving Jesus more today than you did yesterday. Man, breakfast over the weekend, men's breakfast, was a wow moment. Troy shared his story. And he wrestled with it and he struggled with it. And he would never want to speak publicly in front of people, but then two, to share his story. And if you are not a guy and didn't get to hear it, I'm sorry for you, because it was a very powerful story. But all of a sudden, Troy wakes up on Sunday morning. Troy's going to wake up tomorrow morning feeling more on purpose than he did the day before, because his story had an impact on so many other people's lives. That was a wow moment for Troy. We may start off with, moving lights and color changing spoons as the wow moments. And those are cool, but the real wow moments are these moments where people are stepping further into choosing to say, I am longing for God, and I don't know what it looks like, but I'm just going to do what he's given me. I'm going to MacGyver it together, and we're just going to do. I'm going to pray as if everything depends on God, but I'm going to just act like everything depends on me. And heaven is my business, and I want heaven to be the most successful business that there is. So I'm just going to wow people. So this morning, Ford Point, are you Esther or are you Haman? And it's okay if there's some Haman in you, because I've spent a lot of my life with Haman in me. But the first step to recovery is what? Admitting you have a problem. And we're okay with this place being filled with people who have problems. Because newsflash, it already is. And we're going to be okay with that. In fact, we want that. We want you to feel like you belong, maybe before you believe. But this morning is an opportunity to say, you know what? I've been that person. I've been trying to mask it, but maybe it's not so hidden. And this morning is an opportunity to come clean, an opportunity to be broken. And say, God, I've had these different things in that longing space, in that number one space, when it should have been you. And for whatever reason, I kind of, talked myself into it. I've kind of built up this world where I justified it and said it was okay. But this morning, I see that it's not. And I want to exchange that. I want to put that down. And I want you to be there. And when he's in that spot, man, the world around you can become crumbling, Forward Point, but you will be the most on purpose, content. And it's going to drive the people around you crazy because they're still longing for that other life. But in that state, you're just going to be creating all sorts of wow moments. And it's going to change your world and the world around you. So would you join me this morning in setting our longing for God so that he may change our hearts, so he does give us the desires of our heart. God, we come before you this morning recognizing that these events that took place thousands of years ago lived out by some fractured people are not any different than the people that are here now living. And we admit before you that we are fractured people. But instead of trying to live out our flawless plan this morning, we want to submit to your flawless plan. So we're asking you, as your presence is here, as your Holy Spirit is here working in our hearts and convicting us and revealing to us all the places where you have a better option for us this morning, we're coming before you. And as we respond through singing, as we respond through maybe inviting someone from the prayer team coming forward, getting prayed over, coming forward and just symbolically laying things at the altar. But this morning that you would respond to the work that the Holy Spirit is right now doing inside of you to say, that's what I want for you. That same kind of purpose, that same kind of contentment, that's what I want for you. If you feel him speaking that to you this morning, then do not leave without having responded to that moment. Because it's going to look different. He's putting something on your heart that's different. It's not about us becoming one giant. It's about us being individuals as a mosaic that comes together and people look at it and they say, wow. So God, just continue to have your way in this place as we respond to you.